Listen to the JT Sports Podcast on all podcasting platforms and leave a 5-star review.
NC State versus Clemson. This is the last game that we have to talk about on this episode of the podcast. Both of these two teams are coming into this game ranked inside of the top 10 with 4-0 records. This game is going to be kicking off this Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. Clemson is going to be coming into this game as a 6.5-point favorite. Now, last year, when these two teams matched off against each other, NC State won 27-21 in overtime. And when you look at the box score of that game, it was complete domination on the behalf of the Wolfpack. First downs, Clemson 10, NC State 31. Third down conversions, Clemson was 2 of 11. NC State was 11 of 21. And when it came to time of possession, it was extremely one-sided. Clemson held the ball for 18 minutes and 12 seconds. NC State had the ball for 41 minutes and 48 seconds. And then when it came to the passing game for Clemson, outside of Justin Ross, they had pretty much no production from their wide receivers in the passing game. So going into this year's game, you look at DJ Uyunglele. He's coming off pretty much the best performance of his collegiate career against Wake Forest. He was 26 of 41. He threw for 271 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and he also had 52 rushing yards as well. And, I feel like this season, he's been steady. I don't think he's been bad. He hasn't been great, but he's been steady. Now, of course, you want more because you look at the line of quarterbacks that have came before DJ Uyunglele, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson. Those guys were dudes. And you're waiting for DJ Uyunglele to become a dude. And he looked like that last week. And he needs to repeat that performance this week if Clemson wants to be able to remain undefeated, because NC State has a really good team. They have a veteran team that's experienced. They have a really good quarterback in Devin Leary. And last year, Devin Leary ate this Clemson defense up. And that was with Brent Venables, who now is the head coach of Oklahoma at DC last year. And the main reason why Clemson's defense struggled in that game was, in my opinion, because they got tired. They started getting gassed. They were on the field for a lot of plays because the offense kept going 3 and out, couldn't really get anything going, couldn't really sustain drives. So the defense got tired and they got gassed. And eventually, NC State's offense started to produce. So going into this matchup, I'm not expecting NC State to have a offensive explosion. As a matter of fact, last year they didn't really have a offensive explosion. It's not like they went for like over 500, 600 yards. They did what they needed to do to win the game, partly due to the offense struggling. So for Clemson, you got to be able to make sure that your offense can build off what they did last week against Wake Forest. Now, although the passing game was finding their groove, I'm not expecting the passing game to be able to repeat that same performance this week against a way better defense. However, I definitely think that the run game definitely should be there for Clemson as long as they continue to feed Will Shipley. Will Shipley has turned it on over the last couple of weeks for the Tigers. Last week against Wake Forest, he had 20 carries for 104 rushing yards, 5.2 yards per attempt, and the touchdown. And I think this Clemson offense is really at their best when they're allowing it to flow through Will Shipley. So I expect him to get a good amount of touches in this game. And for the defense, as long as your offense isn't going 3 and out and as bad as what they were last year, you should have a way better performance. Now, NC State does have a pretty good offense all the way around, but however, their offense isn't as good as what it was last season. This is an offense that kind of hasn't been as explosive compared to what they were in 2021. So you have to wonder, how good is the secondary going to be? Because the secondary got torched last year by Devin Leary. He was 32 of 44. He threw for 238 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. He got sacked 3 times. And the Clemson secondary got towards last week against Wake Forest. Sam Hartman threw 6 touchdowns, 20 of 29, 337 passing yards. So if that secondary can't handle up and that pass rush gets handled by that NC State offensive line, that Clemson defense could be in for a very long game. Because I think for Clemson, your front seven is pretty good, but the back end of your secondary is where you get into trouble at. And really, you haven't really faced the team prior to playing Wake Forest that could really test out your secondary and where your secondary's at. And we saw where Clemson's secondary is at right now, and it still is a work in progress. So I just wonder, how effective is the ground game going to be for NC State? Because I don't think NC State needs to have success on the ground to win this game. However, I do think if they can remain being balanced, it definitely helps their chances. But with Clemson's secondary being, as bad as what it was last week against Wake Forest, do you really need to run the football? Do you really have to, unless you get put in third and short situations? But for me, I just feel like I got to take Clemson to win this game. And the reason why I'm going with Clemson is because NC State, to me, isn't as good as a team this year like they were last year. Okay, last year, the defense was pretty good, but the offense was also pretty solid as well. And this year, the offense is not bad, but it's not as good as what it was last year. And I just think with this Clemson defense, as long as the offense doesn't have the kind of game they had last year, which I don't think they will, I think this defense is going to hold NC State to less than 14 points. And you look at what NC State has done this year against their FBS competition. Week 1 against Eastern Carolina, they almost lost that game. Okay. You also look at what they did against Texas Tech. Wasn't really all that impressed. I felt like Texas Tech pretty much up into the end was still in the game until NC State was able to score a touchdown late. But overall, I just think that Clemson is a better team than NC State this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if Clemson wins this game by at least 2 touchdowns. So I'm going to take Clemson to win 31-14 is my final score prediction in this game. I'm taking Clemson with the victory. And this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. Let me know what you guys think about this episode, who you guys have winning. Leave your predictions down in the comment section. Also, make sure that you check out the JT Sports Podcast, available on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available.